Well, the influential former editor of Cosmopolitan magazine, who broke new ground in empowering women in the 1960s, has died. Helen Gurley Brown introduced candid discussions about women and their sex lives in her magazine and wrote a controversial book, Sex and the Single Girl. That was in 1962. She died Monday at a New York hospital after a brief hospitalization. Brown was 90 years old.
Helen Gurley Brown first found fame when she wrote Sex and the Single Girl. Its contents shocked America. Not only did unmarried women have sex, they enjoyed it too. The book was a runaway success, sold 2 million copies in 3 weeks, and stayed on the bestseller list for a year. In 1965, she took over Cosmopolitan magazine. Back then, women's mags targeted housewives with families, and the articles were mostly about how to bring up the perfect child and the latest diet fads. Helen Gurley Brown called herself a feminist. She was criticized by some for focusing on how to get a man and how to please him, but the effect she had on women is undeniable. She was at the helm of Cosmopolitan magazine for more than 3 decades, and those who knew her say she was driven. But out of the office, she was known to be flirty and fun. Her mantra was good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere.
Gurley Brown is credited with ushering in the 1960s sexual revolution by revamping a failing Cosmo. Under her stewardship, she turned the magazine into a provocative and often racy read.
Brown was as bold as her headlines and dating columns, the consummate New Yorker in zebra print and big earrings.
I think that Helen really helped create today's modern woman. I don't think that women would be in the careers that they have, that they would be CEOs today if there hadn't been Helen Gurley Brown. Because Helen said, you can do it.
She wasn't without critics. When a New York Times writer suggested that Cosmo was a woman's answer to Playboy, Brown fired back, saying the magazine was for young women who love men and children, but don't want to be identified solely as wife, girlfriend, and mother.
She was a part of the women's liberation movement of the 1960s, and that paved the way for real gains towards equality for all women.
In a 2003 appearance on the Today Show, she talked about growing old.
I think 80 is desperately old. 60s, kind of, you can be frisky and run around, and who pays much attention anymore? It used to be 40, now it's going all the way up to 60, you're fine. But 80, please, it's called Give Me a Break.
At 80, she was still taking tango lessons. At 90, she was still overseeing 64 international editions of Cosmo. Life here will somehow not seem the same without her near-daily arrival, a statement from Hearst said. She'll be remembered, said the CEO of Hearst, as the quintessential Cosmo girl.
3 years later, that philosophy in Brown took over Cosmo magazine. She's quoted as saying, good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere else, and humorously credited with separating more young women from their virginity than anyone else in the world.